The sound was so small, I almost didn't hear it. A whisper of paper against hardwood, just barely louder than the dryers churning 6 floors below, working through their midnight loads with that low, endless mechanical moan. I'd been standing at the kitchenette counter with a glass of water, still in my Gristedis uniform, the polyester collar stiff with 12 hours of other people's groceries. My feet hadn't stopped aching since 9 o'clock that morning. Then I heard it, that soft, deliberate slide. Something pushed under the door. I set the glass down, crossed the room in 3 steps. The envelope was lying on the floor, like it belonged there. Cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind that costs more per sheet than I make in an hour. I picked it up, and my thumbnail caught the edge. I turned it over. Gold calligraphy. My name, in letters so precise they looked engraved rather than written. Claire Maddox, guest of honor. I read it once, then I read it again, slower, the way you reread a sentence when you're certain you've misread it, but you haven't. Claire Maddox. I hadn't been Claire Maddox in 8 months. The woman standing in this room, 400 square feet above a laundromat on West 47th Street, wearing a name tag that said Claire and smelling faintly of industrial floor cleaner, was Claire Novak. She always had been, underneath everything. She just hadn't had the paperwork to prove it for a while. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress springs made that familiar sound, tight and tired. I didn't open the envelope right away. I turned it in my hands and felt the weight of it, the deliberate weight of something designed to impress. And I thought about Derek Maddox sitting somewhere very comfortable, probably at his club off Park Avenue, probably with a glass of Blanton's Single Barrel, laughing about this. I could hear the laugh even now, that loose, confident sound he made when he was certain the room was on his side. "She'll show up in something from the clearance rack," he would have said. I knew his voice so well I could write his lines for him. "She's probably scanning coupons right now." God, can you imagine her face? I imagine his friends raising their glasses to that. I imagine him licking the gold seal himself. I opened the envelope. The invitation inside there was for a wedding. His wedding, Derek Maddox and Tanya Reeves, to be celebrated on a Saturday in late March at the Four Seasons Ballroom, 57 East 57th Street. Black tie, reception to follow, RSVP by the 15th. At the bottom, in Derek's own handwriting, I recognized the angular tilt of it. 3 words had been added in blue ink. "Do come, Claire." I set the card on my knee. Outside, a cab honked twice on 47th Street. The dryers below kept turning. I wasn't angry. That surprised me, but it was true. What I felt wasn't anger. It was something quieter and more solid than that. Anger is heat. This was the opposite of heat. This was the feeling of a window opening in a room that hadn't had fresh air in a very long time. I knew what this was. Derek had sent the invitation as a joke, an act of cruelty dressed up in expensive paper. He wanted me to decline it in silence, or worse, to show up broken, to give him one last scene to recount over bourbon for the next decade. He had spent 8 months being absolutely certain of who I was now and what I was capable of. He had made that calculation without a single piece of correct information. "Okay," I said out loud, to the empty room, to the ceiling, with its water-stained plaster and its bare bulb. My own voice sounded strange to me. Not fragile, not thin, just clear. I was going to accept. I reached over to the nightstand to set the invitation down, and my hand landed next to the paper bag that had been sitting there for 3 weeks. Brown grocery store paper, folded over twice at the top, held closed with a binder clip. I hadn't opened it since the night I brought it home. I hadn't needed to. I already knew what was inside. Photocopied intake forms, billing records, a consent document bearing my signature on a line I had never touched, and a 2-page summary in Rosa Delgado's careful handwriting that explained, in plain, specific, devastating language, exactly what Derek Maddox had done and how he had done it. In the dim light from the street below, the edges of those papers were just visible at the top of the bag where the fold had loosened slightly. One corner of a document, the letterhead of the Harrington Private Clinic on East 68th Street, caught the light. I clipped the bag shut again, then I turned off the lamp, lay back on the bed in my uniform, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes adjusted to the dark. I had 3 weeks. I lay in the dark above the laundromat and thought about the man I had married. Not the man he turned out to be, the man he seemed to be, which, for a long time, felt like the same thing. I met Derek Maddox on a Wednesday afternoon in October, 6 years ago. I was 28. I was waitressing lunch shifts at a narrow diner on Lexington, the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that came in a pot that was always slightly burnt. I was in my 3rd year of nursing school, and I was tired in the specific way you get tired when you are paying for everything yourself and sleeping 6 hours a night and still believing it will be worth it. He sat at the counter. Not a booth, the counter. He ordered black coffee and the turkey club, and he ate without looking at his phone, which I noticed because almost nobody did that anymore. When I brought his check, there was a folded note under the saucer. I thought it was a complaint. It wasn't. I've been coming here for 2 years. You're the first person who refilled my coffee without my asking. Would you like coffee somewhere that isn't this diner? Oi comage da ka abri maddox m.a. I showed it to my co-worker, Maria. She read it twice. Okay, she said. He spelled everything correctly. That's already better than most. He was 35. He had a calm face and quiet hands and the kind of listening that makes you feel like the smartest person in the room. On our third date, he asked me what I was afraid of. Not as a line, but leaning forward with his elbows on the table, genuinely waiting. Ending up exactly where I started, I said. He nodded slowly. Me too, he said. I believed him. That part, I think, was real. Or at least it was real for him at 35 before he found a more efficient solution to that particular fear. We married the following spring at a small ceremony in Connecticut. His family came. Mine came. My mother, my younger sister Denise, 2 cousins. It was warm. There were white tulips. I remember thinking, standing in the parking lot afterward, that my life had just fundamentally changed and I was not afraid. We moved into the penthouse on East 72nd. 14 floors up, with windows that faced south and a kitchen bigger than my entire previous apartment. It was the kind of place I had never expected to live in, and for a while I felt slightly guilty about that, the way you feel guilty about good luck you didn't entirely earn. You don't need to work that hard anymore, Derek said, about 2 months in. We were in the kitchen. He was making coffee. His voice was gentle and completely certain. Finish the semester, sure, but after that, let the school go. You have time now. We have time. I told myself I was making a practical choice. I told myself I could go back. I never went back. The good years were real. I want to say that clearly. Sunday mornings with the paper and coffee and light coming through the south windows. Derek reading aloud the parts he found interesting, the way he genuinely laughed sometimes, the way he remembered small things. That I hated cilantro, that I liked the window open when I slept even in January. But even then, even in the warmth, there were things I filed away and forgot to examine. The way he talked about his colleagues, never by name, only by specialty or mistake. The orthopedic guy who blew the Kellerman case. The internist who can't read a liability structure. People were categories. Problems were management issues. How was the Brennan patient today? I asked once at dinner. The Brennan case, he said, correcting me without looking up. Complicated, but containable. I let it pass. That was the word for what I did. I let things pass, smoothed them into the background noise of a life that was, by most measures, comfortable and full. He never introduced me to his business partners. I assumed that was normal for medicine. Practices, investors, cosigners on the clinic acquisition, that was his professional world, and I stayed in mine, which by then was charity committees and gallery openings and 3 evenings a week volunteering at a hospital intake desk, which was the closest I could get to the work I had given up. Without admitting, I missed it. 3 years into the marriage, he brought me to a fundraiser for the clinic, the Harrington Private Clinic on East 68th, the one he'd recently co-invested in. There were candles on tall tables and a string quartet in the corner, and the kind of crowd that wore small diamonds and spoke about philanthropy in the same tone they used for quarterly returns. Midway through the evening, a woman crossed the room toward us, late 20s, blonde, with a composure that looked professionally maintained. This is Tanya, Derek said, one of our investors. She has a background in medical billing and insurance structuring. Tanya Reeves shook my hand. Her grip was firm and brief and deliberate. Claire, she said, I've heard a lot about you. She looked at me then, fully, carefully, the way you look at something you already know the shape of. It wasn't pity, exactly. It was something that required pity as an ingredient but had been refined into something colder and more patient. I didn't know what to do with it. So I smiled and moved on, and spent the rest of the evening assuming I had imagined it. I hadn't imagined anything. The document was tucked between a visa statement and a folded copy of our homeowner's policy. I was looking for the insurance card. Our car registration had expired, and I needed to call the broker before noon. The folder smelled like the cedar drawer where Derek kept everything important. Clean and dry and expensive, even paper. The consent form had my name at the top in printed block letters. Claire Maddox. Below that, a signature line. Below that, what looked like my signature. I read the title twice before the words settled. Authorization for release of psychiatric evaluation records. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long time. The refrigerator cycled on. The city hummed 12 floors below us. That evening, I set the form on the dinner table between us. Derek looked at it without picking it up. He cut another piece of his chicken. "What is this?" I asked. "It's a consent form." "I know what it says. I'm asking why my signature is on it. I've never had a psychiatric evaluation." He set down his fork, not quickly, slowly, deliberately, the way you set something down when you want the other person to understand that you are choosing patience. "Claire." His voice was level, almost gentle. "We signed a stack of documents during the refinancing in October. Do you remember October? You were exhausted. You signed 12 things in 40 minutes. I would have remembered this. You were exhausted," he said again. "Just that." He picked up his fork. He finished his chicken. He asked me if I wanted the last of the wine. I didn't say another word. Not because I believed him, but because his calmness sat on my chest like a hand pressing down slowly, and I couldn't find the air for a real argument. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived while Derek was at the clinic. Cream envelope, official header, a family court mediator's office. I read it standing in the hallway, with my coat still on. A psychiatric assessment, filed under my name, conducted at the Harrington Private Clinic on East 68th Street, had been submitted as evidence in our asset proceedings. The assessment concluded I suffered from, I'm quoting the letter directly, significant dissociative episodes and impaired judgment, rendering me unsuitable to manage shared financial assets. I had never been to the Harrington Private Clinic. I had never spoken to anyone there. I did not have a therapist, a psychiatrist, or a standing prescription of any kind. I called Derek's cell phone. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear the clinic in the background, a door closing, shoes on tile. "There's a letter here," I said, "from a mediator. It's referencing a psychiatric assessment from Harrington Clinic." "Derek, I have never been to that clinic." A pause, brief. "I think we should talk about this at home. I want to talk about it now." "Claire." Another pause. "You've been under a lot of stress. I've been worried about you for a while. It was meant to help clarify things legally. It's standard." "It's not standard. It's forged." He hung up. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I sat down on the bench by the door and pressed both palms flat against my thighs because they were shaking and I didn't know what else to do with them. I called a lawyer the next morning, a general practice attorney on 42nd Street. She reviewed the letter, reviewed the consent form I'd photographed, and told me, carefully, that contesting a filed psychiatric assessment mid-divorce proceedings was expensive, slow, and often unsuccessful when the opposing party was a physician with institutional credibility. "What are my options?" I asked. "Financially." She looked at her notes. "Yebomke. Limited. Within 3 weeks, I was out of the penthouse. The settlement gave me the contents of one suitcase, not a large one, and a bank account with $340 in it. $340. Derek's attorney had been thorough. There was nothing left to argue over that wouldn't cost more than it was worth. The room above the laundromat on West 47th Street cost $420 a month. The landlord took first month in cash and told me not to use the back staircase after 10 p.m. The night I moved in, I stood outside my own door for a long time. The key was in my hand, a simple thing, a brass key, a standard lock. I had locked and unlocked doors my entire life without thinking about it. My hands would not stop shaking. I tried twice. The key scraped against the plate, missed, scraped again. Down the hall, a television droned through someone's wall. The carpet under my feet smelled like cigarette smoke and old wool. I slid down the door and sat on the floor. I didn't have a plan yet. I didn't have a next step. I had $340 and a brass key I couldn't fit into a lock, and I sat there on that hallway floor for 20 minutes until my hands steadied enough to try again. That was the bottom. I didn't know yet that someone else had been watching what Derek did. Someone who'd kept a copy of everything. The staffing agency placed me at Harrington Private Clinic on a Wednesday in early March. A 9-hour intake shift, data entry, scanning old patient files into a new digital record system. The pay was $14 an hour, which was $2 more than Gristides. I wore my one good blouse and took the 6 train uptown. The clinic smelled like fresh paint and recycled air. The reception desk was pale birchwood, the kind designed to look calming. I sat behind it with a stack of manila folders and a scanner that jammed every 4th page, and I got to work. By noon, I'd processed 67 files. By 2 in the afternoon, my lower back ached and I was on my third cup of coffee from a machine in the break room that dispensed it lukewarm and tasting faintly of plastic. That's when she appeared. She was maybe in her late 40s, compact, with reading glasses pushed up into dark hair. She moved quietly for someone carrying a full cup and a clipboard. She sat both down on the desk and looked at me for a moment before she spoke. "Is your name Claire Novak?" I stopped typing. "Yes." She didn't introduce herself right away. She glanced toward the hallway, once, briefly, then back at me. "I'm Rosa. I coordinate intake here." She paused. "I've been waiting 11 months to give this to someone I could trust. I think you're her." She slid a brown paper bag across the desk. The kind you'd get at a bodega. Folded shut at the top. I didn't touch it. "What is this?" "Everything," she said quietly. "Everything he used against you." My coffee cup was still in my hand. I set it down very carefully. "I recognized your name in the temp agency request," Rosa continued. "I asked to have you placed specifically at this desk today. I'm sorry for the strangeness of that. I didn't know another way." "Who sent you?" The question came out flat, almost rude. I didn't soften it. "Nobody sent me." She met my eyes. "I kept copies because I was scared." Turns out I was right to be. She reached up and adjusted her glasses. They were already straight, a nervous habit. I raised questions internally about a year ago, about a patient file that had been backdated. 2 weeks later, I was moved out of my senior coordinator role. No explanation, just a new title, same job, less authority. I looked at the bag. "What's in it?" "Copies," she said. "A psychiatric evaluation, fraudulent. I can tell you how I know, if you want the details. A billing record showing who ordered it and who paid for it personally. And a memo," she lowered her voice further, "signed by one of the party owners, authorizing the backdated file." I knew the name before she said it. "Derek Maddox," I said. She nodded once. "He used this clinic as a tool, Miss Novak, and then he made sure the people who noticed paid a price for noticing." The scanner beeped beside me. A jammed page. Neither of us moved to fix it. "Why me?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because you're the one it was done to," Rosa said simply. "And because the statute of limitations on keeping quiet has a way of running out." She picked up her clipboard. "I have to get back." I've already said more than I planned to say out loud. She walked back down the hallway. I watched her until she turned the corner. I finished the shift. 8 more folders, 2 more jams, 1 more cup of bad coffee. I carried the paper bag home on the 6 train, holding it in my lap with both hands, the way you'd carry something fragile. It wasn't fragile. It was paper and ink, but it felt like something that could break if I wasn't careful. Back in my room above the laundromat, I set the bag on the bed. I sat beside it. The machines below cycled through their spin, a low mechanical hum rising through the floor. I didn't open it again. I already knew what was inside. I'd seen the top sheet when Rosa had shown me the edge of the first page to prove she wasn't bluffing. My name, Derek's signature, a clinic letterhead I now recognized from the address alone. 4 hours I sat there. Then I reached for my phone and scrolled to a name I had saved 11 months ago and never dialed. A name that a paralegal had whispered to me in a courthouse hallway the day the divorce was finalized, when she'd said, very quietly, "If you ever think something was wrong with how this went, call him first. Mr. Gerald Harrington, Lexington Avenue." I pressed call before I could stop myself. It rang twice. "Harrington," said a voice, low, careful, awake despite the hour. "My name is Claire Novak," I said. "I have documentation of a fraud. I need to know if it's enough." A pause. Not a long one. "Tell me what you have," he said. He told me to come at 9 in the morning. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the mattress with the paper bag between my feet and the invitation on the windowsill, and I waited for the city to get light. Mr. Harrington's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Lexington Avenue, where the elevator smelled like old wood polish and the carpet was the color of wet concrete. His assistant showed me in without asking my name twice. That felt like a good sign. He was already at his desk. 60 maybe, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a coffee cup he hadn't touched. He shook my hand once, firmly, and pointed to the chair across from him. "Show me what you have," he said. I put the paper bag on his desk. I put the wedding invitation beside it. Then I laid down the timeline I had written out in the laundromat that morning, in blue ink on 3 pages of notebook paper, because I needed to be able to say everything in the right order without losing the thread. He read. He didn't ask questions. He turned the pages slowly, held 2 of the clinic documents up to the window light, and set them back down. The only sound in the room was traffic 14 floors below and the faint tick of a clock somewhere I couldn't locate. 40 minutes. He didn't speak for 40 minutes. Then he took his glasses off his forehead, set them on the desk, and looked at me. "This is federal insurance fraud," he said, "and identity fraud. Your signature was forged on a consent form used to generate a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation, which was then submitted to a court during active divorce proceedings to influence asset distribution." He paused. "This is also the cleanest case I have seen in 15 years. I felt something shift behind my sternum. Not relief. Something older than relief. "What do we do?" I asked. "3 things," he said. "In order." He held up one finger. "We file a formal complaint with the State Medical Board and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I want that to land the week of the wedding, not before. Timing matters." A second finger. "You attend the wedding. You go in person. I'll arrange for Pete Solis. He's a former federal investigator, works private now. I've used him before, to accompany you with a colleague. You will personally receive the civil complaint delivery in public, which creates a record of service that cannot be disputed." He set his hand flat on the desk. "Third, and this is the part you have to promise me, everything is done legally. No raised voices, no scenes. You walk in, the papers are served, you walk out. That's all I want," I said. He looked at me for a moment. "Good, because anything else hands him sympathy." I nodded. I picked up my bag. "Come back Thursday," he said. "I'll have the complaint drafted." I went back to Gristades the next morning. I put on my apron, I opened my lane at 7:45, and I scanned groceries for 8 hours. A woman argued with me for 4 minutes about a coupon for Greek yogurt. I gave her the discount. I smiled at her. I was very calm. I called Dana that night from the fire escape. She picked up on the first ring. "Claire, what's happening?" I told her everything. I told her about the paper bag and the invitation and the 40 minutes in Gerald Harrington's office and the plan that now had a shape and a schedule. She was quiet for a moment. Then she started crying. "Dana," I said. "I know," she said through the crying. "I know, I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong. I knew it when the court ruled. I kept thinking, this doesn't make sense." "It's going to be fine," I said. "How are you not crying right now?" I looked out over the alley behind the building. A plastic bag was caught on a fire escape railing below, flickering in the cold wind. "Because I already know how it ends," I said. "I worked every shift for 3 weeks. I said nothing to anyone at the store. I came home, I read through copies of the documents Harrington's office sent me, and I slept 7 hours a night because I had decided to." 10 days before the wedding, my phone rang. It was a woman from Harrington's investigative team. "Ms. Novak," she said. "We've gone through the billing records from Harrington Private Clinic." A pause. Tanya Reeves's name appears as the referring contact on the fraudulent evaluation. I sat down on the edge of my bed. "She referred the case," I said. "She initiated the intake referral. She signed the internal request form." Another pause. "Ms. Dumbo, Ms. Novak, she didn't just know about the evaluation. I already understood what came next. She helped design it," the woman said. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. The radiator ticked behind me. That was the only sound in the room. Tanya Reeves had not simply known. She had walked into that clinic and written her name on the intake form. She had chosen me too. I needed to understand the whole picture, not just what Derek had done, but how he'd built it. Mr. Harrington's team sent me a transcript 2 days later, an interview with a physician named Dr. Anita Cho. She had worked alongside Derek at Harrington Private Clinic until 2 years ago when she left quietly and without explanation. I read the transcript sitting on the floor of my room with my back against the bed frame, the pages spread across the bare wood. The investigator had asked her to describe how Derek operated. "He was methodical," Dr. Cho said in the transcript. "He didn't take risks. He identified patients who were isolated, or co-signatories who were trusting. He used the psychiatric wing to generate documentation, a voluntary evaluation here, a follow-up assessment there. On paper, it looked like legitimate clinical practice. And the billing, the investigator had asked. There was a shell company. It processed the insurance reimbursements. The clinic would submit the claim. The shell company would receive a portion of the payout, and the difference got absorbed into administrative overhead. If you weren't looking closely, it read as normal operational cost. How long had this been running? Dr. Cho's answer was one sentence. Since before I joined. I stopped reading, pressed the back of my hand against my mouth for a moment. Then I kept going. Derek had been doing this for years. Long before our marriage. Long before me. I was not the beginning of anything. I was a continuation. The investigator had asked Dr. Cho whether she had ever raised concerns internally. Once, she said. Derek took me to lunch afterward. It was a very pleasant lunch. He was charming and attentive and told me he understood my concerns completely. And then he told me, very gently, that the clinic's malpractice insurer happened to carry my liability coverage. He just mentioned it. In passing. So he threatened you. He reminded me, Dr. Cho said. That's how Derek operated. He never raised his voice. He never made a direct threat. He simply made sure you understood the geography. I set the transcript down on the floor. Outside, a garbage truck was making its rounds, the hydraulic arm groaning and releasing. It was 7 in the morning, and I hadn't slept. While I sat on that floor, Derek was having breakfast on East 72nd Street. He had moved Tanya into the penthouse 4 months after the divorce was finalized. They had cream-colored furniture and a coffee machine that cost more than my monthly rent. I knew this because Rosa had mentioned it, almost in passing, during one of our conversations. She'd heard about the penthouse from a nurse who had attended their housewarming. Derek had told his social circle that the divorce had been painful, that Claire had struggled, that he had done everything he could, but some people simply weren't equipped for the pressure of a certain kind of life. He said it with the careful sorrow of a man who had been failed, not a man who had committed a crime. And people believed him because he was a physician and he spoke in measured tones and he always picked up the check. I turned back to the last page of the transcript. Near the end, the investigator had asked Dr. Cho if Derek had ever spoken about me specifically. There was a pause in the transcript. The investigator had noted it, a pause of approximately 4 seconds. Then Dr. Cho said, "There was a dinner, a clinic dinner, maybe 3 years ago. I remember Derek said something about Claire, about his wife. He said she was wonderful, warm, good-hearted." Another pause. And then he said, "I remember the exact phrasing. He said she was the kind of woman who would never think to look." I read it again, the kind of woman who would never think to look. He had not chosen me in spite of my intelligence. He had chosen me because he had measured it and found it, in his opinion, insufficient to threaten him. The transcript ended there. I gathered the pages carefully, tapped them into a neat stack against the floor, and slid them back into the manila folder. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little. I thought about Derek at that dinner table 3 years ago. The candlelight, the wine, the easy laughter, describing me to colleagues over a shared appetizer, like a calculation he had already completed. And then a different thought arrived, quieter and colder. If Dr. Cho was willing to put this on record, she was not the only one. I called Mr. Harrington's office at 8 o'clock sharp. "How many others?" I asked when he answered. A pause. "We're still counting," he said. 4 days before the wedding, the morning shift started at 7. The store smelled of floor wax and the cold plastic of freshly stocked refrigerator shelves. I had lane 3, the express, and by 9 o'clock the line was already 6 deep. The woman came in around 11. Middle-aged, leather-tote, a small mountain of items for a basket that was supposed to hold 12 or fewer. I didn't say anything about that. I scanned a bottle of olive oil, a bunch of bananas, 2 cans of chickpeas, then the magazine slid onto the belt. New York Social, the April issue. Derek and Tanya were on the cover. He was in a tuxedo, head thrown back in that laugh I used to find charming before I understood what it meant. Tanya was in a red dress, one shoulder bare, one hand resting on his chest, like she was steadying herself. The penthouse windows glittered behind them. The headline read, "Manhattan's Most Anticipated Wedding." I scanned it. The barcode beeped. I put it face down in the bag. "You have a rewards card?" I asked. "I do somewhere," the woman said, digging in her tote. "Hold on." I waited. I looked at the conveyor belt. I waited some more. She paid with a card, thanked me, left. The next customer stepped up. I finished my shift at 3. I clocked out at the back counter, hung my scanner on its hook, and walked to the staff bathroom at the end of the hall. I turned the lock. The fluorescent light buzzed once before it steadied. The mirror above the sink had a crack in the lower left corner, the kind that had been there so long nobody bothered to report it anymore. My hands were shaking, not the controlled tremor of someone tired, the real kind. The kind I remembered from 8 months ago, sitting on the floor of the room on West 47th Street the night I understood what Derek had actually done to me. I gripped the edge of the sink. I looked at myself in that cracked mirror under that buzzing light, and I let the thought come, the one I had been keeping behind a door for 3 weeks. What if it doesn't work? What if he walks away from this too? What if 200 people in that ballroom watch a federal envelope get handed to Derek Maddox and he smiles and says something charming and the whole thing just dissolves? He had done it before. He had forged my name on a medical document, had a clinic declare me mentally unfit, liquidated our joint assets, and walked out of a courtroom looking like the injured party. He had done all of that and then sent me a wedding invitation as a joke. I looked at my watch. I gave myself 4 minutes. I stood there and I let it be as bad as it actually was. The 7 months of scanning coupons, the apron, the magazine cover, the way his laugh looked the same as it always had, like none of it had cost him a single night's sleep. 4 minutes. Then I turned on the tap. The water was cold, colder than I expected, and I held it against my face for a count of 5. I dried off with a paper towel that smelled faintly of industrial soap. I looked at the mirror again. He sent it as a joke, I said, quietly, to myself. I wasn't going to let that be the last line of the story. I retied my apron, unlocked the door, and walked back out to lane 3. The afternoon rush was starting. A man with a handcart of sparkling water was already waiting. Sorry about the wait, I said. No problem, he said. I started scanning. My hands were steady. When I got home that evening, the room above the laundromat smelled of dryer heat and someone's fabric softener drifting up through the floorboards. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed play on the voicemail light blinking red on the landline the landlord had never bothered to remove. Mr. Harrington's voice came through calm and precise, the way it always was. Claire, call me when you get this. The FBI has confirmed receipt of the complaint. It has been flagged for priority review. A brief pause. The timing will hold. I sat with that for a moment. Then I set the phone down, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling while the dryers churned below me like something counting down. Dana had borrowed a friend's apartment on West 58th Dawisji, about 4 blocks from the Four Seasons, which I appreciated for reasons both practical and psychological. She'd flown in from Austin that morning, arrived with a carry-on and a brown paper bag of breakfast tacos that neither of us could finish. The apartment smelled like someone else's candles, something amber and vanilla, and it felt strange to dress for this in a space that wasn't mine. The charcoal dress I had bought 3 weeks earlier, on a Thursday, from a boutique on Madison Avenue where I paid cash and told the saleswoman nothing. It was simple. A clean cut, fitted through the shoulders, hitting just below the knee. Understated was the word I'd used when I tried it on. The saleswoman had called it severe. She meant it as a compliment. Dana sat on the edge of the bed and watched me zip it up. You look like someone who's already won, she said quietly. That's the point, I said. She handed me my mother's watch, the one with the cracked second hand that still kept perfect time. I fastened it on my left wrist without looking. Are you scared? Dana asked. I thought about that honestly. No, I said. I'm organized. She laughed just once, low and involuntary, like she was surprised she still could. Pete Solis was in the lobby at 5:45, exactly where he'd said he'd be. His colleague, a broad-shouldered man who had introduced himself once and then apparently decided that was sufficient, stood 2 feet to his left. Peter was in a dark suit, clean-shaved, and he looked like someone who had done this exact thing many times before in rooms much more dangerous than a ballroom at the Four Seasons. He handed me the manila envelope without ceremony. Civil complaint, he said. Ready to serve. We have a process server in the room already, seated at table 11. He's been there since 4 o'clock. Table 11, I repeated. Near the bar, he said. Good sightlines. I tucked the envelope under my arm. The paper was stiff and cool against my forearm through the fabric of my coat. We took a black car. 5 minutes. Dana sat beside me and looked out the window at the lights on 57th Street and said nothing, which was exactly what I needed from her. The Four Seasons entrance was lit the way you'd light something you wanted people to remember. White flowers in urns. A red carpet that was more blush than red, precise and freshly laid. 2 doormen who opened the doors before we reached them. In the elevator, Dana took my hand. I squeezed once and let go. The ballroom doors were open. I heard the string quartet before I saw anything. Something baroque, technically precise, floating out over the sound of 200 conversations. The room was white and gold. Orchids on every surface. The kind of event that takes 8 months to plan and communicates only one thing. We have won and we want you to know it. A hostess in black stood with clipboard at the entrance. She found my name. ran her finger across it, and stopped. She looked up at me, then at Pete, then at his colleague. "Miss Maddox." "Novak," I said. "But yes, I'm on the list." She looked uncertain in the way people do when they've been given instructions that didn't account for the actual situation. She glanced behind her toward the room and then back at me. Then she stepped aside. I walked in. Pete and his colleague fell into step behind me, 2 paces back, exactly as we discussed. I kept my pace even. The orchids were real, I could smell them, faintly sweet, cutting through the warm air and the perfume of 200 people dressed in their most expensive clothes. I didn't scan the room, I walked toward the center of it and let the room scan me. I heard a shift before I saw it, a particular quality of quiet that moves through a crowd when something unexpected enters it. A few heads turned, then a few more, and then I saw Derek. He was standing near the far wall, talking to 2 men I didn't recognize, a champagne glass in his right hand. He was laughing at something. He turned, the way you do when you feel a room change temperature. He saw me. The glass didn't fall. His hand simply stopped, suspended mid-gesture, as if someone had paused a film. I watched his face move through 4 expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation, and then the 4th one settled in and stayed. It was not anger, it was not contempt, it was the expression of a man who has just understood, for the first time, that something he thought was under his control has not been under his control for quite some time. It was fear. And it looked very good on him. He started walking toward me the moment the calculation finished behind his eyes. I watched him cross the room the way I'd watched him cross rooms for 6 years, shoulders back, chin level, the particular rhythm of a man who has never once doubted he was the most important person present. He was composing his face as he walked. By the time he got within 6 feet, he had almost managed it. Almost. The nearest tables had gone quiet. Not silent, the conversation around us was still running, but the people closest had registered something. A shift in the air. The way you register a drop in pressure before weather arrives. Derek stopped at 6 feet and spoke clearly enough for the table on his left to hear every word. Claire. His voice was calm, generous, even. The voice of a reasonable man dealing with an unreasonable situation. "You need to leave. This is a private event. You were not seriously invited." I let one beat pass, just one. "I was invited, Derek." I kept my voice low and even. "It's in writing. You signed it." Something moved across his jaw, a small tightening. He took 1 step forward, the same step he'd always taken, the same closing of distance that had ended every argument we'd ever had. It worked because of what came with it. The height, the confidence, the absolute certainty that you would be the one to blink first. Pete Solis moved forward 1 pace. Derek stopped. He looked at Pete. He looked back at me. He understood, in that single instant, that the geometry of this room was not what he had designed it to be. I reached into the inside of my coat and brought out the manila envelope. "This is a civil complaint," I said. "Co-filed with a federal fraud action this past Thursday. You can take it now, or I can leave it with the venue manager. Entirely your choice." The envelope was cream-colored and unremarkable, the kind of thing you might carry to any business meeting. The people at the nearest table were no longer pretending to have all the conversations. Derek's attorney, a man named Caldwell, who I recognized from Derek's firm dinners, who was here tonight as a wedding guest, was already moving through the crowd toward us. I could see him over Derek's shoulder, reading the situation as he came, his expression shifting from curious to professional in real time. Derek did not take the envelope. He did not step back. He simply stood there, for the first time in the 6 years I had known him, without a next move. Then I felt a change at his shoulder. Tanya Reeves appeared beside him, the way people appear when they have been listening, from a careful distance. She was in ivory silk, her hair pinned, a small diamond at her throat. She took 1 look at Derek's face, 1 look at the envelope in my hand, 1 look at me. She did not say anything to Derek. She did not say anything to me. She turned, and she walked back through the crowd toward the exit. Steady steps, even pace. She didn't reach for her clutch on the table as she passed it. She didn't stop for her coat at the door. She was simply gone. Derek turned his head to watch her go. And in his face, for just a moment, I saw something I had not expected. Not rage, not calculation, but a raw and sudden loneliness that looked almost real. Almost. Then the string quartet, which had been playing something bright and European in the corner throughout all of this, stopped mid-phrase. The bow lifted from the strings. The silence that followed was total and complete, and every person in that room turned to look at us, and there was nowhere left for any of it to hide. Derek took the envelope. His hands were steady. That surprised me. He looked down at it for one full second, then held it out to the side, and his attorney, a man I recognized from the divorce proceedings, silver-haired, always in a very dark suit, stepped forward and took it without a word. The attorney moved to the far edge of the room. He opened the envelope with 2 fingers, the way someone handles a thing they already suspect is dangerous. The pages slid out. He started reading. I watched his face. That was the only thing I watched. It took him less than a minute. His jaw shifted. He read something twice. Then he folded the pages back along their crease, very carefully, the way you fold something you wish you'd never opened, and he walked back to Derek. He leaned close. He spoke quietly enough that I couldn't hear the words. Only the register. Low and flat and absolutely certain. Derek stood in the center of that white room with his hands at his sides and the orchids banked behind him and 200 people watching, and his face went gray. Not pale, gray, the color of a wall that hasn't seen sunlight. Someone near the bar said it out loud. Is the wedding cancelled? No one answered. No one had to. A woman at the nearest table picked up her evening bag and touched her husband's arm. Another guest near the window simply stood, as if standing were the first step of a decision she hadn't finished making yet. Derek's attorney leaned in again. Derek shook his head once, a small movement, almost private. Then Mr. Harrington came through the ballroom doors. He had been waiting in the lobby the entire time. I knew that. I had placed him there, and now he walked in quietly and stood beside me. He carried nothing. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence was a sentence all by itself. Pete Solis stayed where he was, one step behind my right shoulder. Derek looked at me. I want to be precise about what happened in that moment, because I've replayed it many times since. He didn't plead. He didn't threaten. He just looked. The way a person looks when they finally understand that the version of events they've been living inside is finished and the real one has been standing in the room all along. I met his eyes. I held them for 3 full seconds. Then I turned and walked toward the door. Dana was already in the corridor. I heard her heels on the marble and then the elevator button clicking twice, 3 times, the way she always does when she's holding something in. The elevator doors closed behind us. The brass walls gave back our reflections, slightly gold. Then Dana's breath broke. Claire, not yet, I said. Wait until we're outside. She pressed her lips together. I put my arm around her shoulders and kept it there. The lobby doors opened onto 57th Street and the March air came in cold and direct and smelling of exhaust and wet concrete and the city going on exactly as it always had. Dana laughed. Then she was crying. Then both at once, her hand over her mouth. I stood on the sidewalk and felt something I had not felt in 8 months. Not relief, not victory, something quieter than either. The specific weight of nothing. Clean nothing. The way a room feels after you've carried everything out of it. The last order I scanned at Gristides was a woman buying whole bean coffee, a half-gallon of 2% milk, and a birthday cake with yellow roses on the plastic lid. The barcode on the cake box wouldn't read. I had to type it in by hand, 4 digits, the way I'd done 1,000 times. Long week? The woman asked. Last one, I said. She smiled like she didn't know what I meant, took her bag and left. I clocked out at 3:47. In the break room, the coffee machine was making that grinding sound it always made, the one nobody had fixed in 7 months. I folded my apron into a square, set it on the table next to someone's forgotten lunch bag, and walked out. I didn't stop at the manager's office. I'd already sent the letter on Monday, printed, signed, left in the mail slot. That was enough. My phone rang on the A-train platform. Mr. Harrington. The State Medical Board opened a formal investigation this morning, he said. Derek's clinic privileges are suspended pending review. That's not the end of it, but it's the beginning of the end. And Rosa? The FBI has confirmed her as a protected witness. She's been offered a position at a different medical group. She starts in April. The train came in loud and pushed a wall of warm, stale air ahead of it. I stepped back. Tanya Reeves cooperated, he continued, fully. 3 years of emails. She's negotiating reduced exposure. I thought about that for a second. I didn't feel anything in particular about it. And the penthouse? Subject to asset recovery. The insurance reimbursements used to purchase it were fraudulently obtained. Derek is looking at the loss of the license, the clinic partnership, and the property. I got on the train, the doors closed. Thank you, Gerald, I said. It was the first time I'd used his first name. He didn't seem to mind. At JFK, I bought a black coffee and sat near the gate with my carry-on between my feet. The paper bag from Rosa was still in my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks without once thinking to take it out. I left it there until we were in the air. Dana picked me up in her pickup truck. The Texas sky above the highway was the color of an orange peel, wide and flat in every direction, and it looked like something you could walk across. "You hungry?" she said. "Not really." "Okay." She turned up the radio. That was the whole conversation for 40 minutes, and it was exactly right. At the ranch I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and watched the last of the light go. A dog barked somewhere across the field. A screen door slapped shut. The air smelled like cedar and dry grass. Nothing like the city. I wasn't happy yet, but I was myself. That's a different thing, and it's enough. 6 weeks later, I was on the same porch when Mr. Harrington sent the notice. Derek Maddox's medical license suspended. The thing he had protected above everything, above me, above honesty, above whatever he might have been, was gone. I set the phone face down on the railing. "Dana," I called through the screen door. "You need help in there? Get in here and peel something," she said. I went inside. The paper bag from Rosa was still in my jacket pocket, hanging on a hook by the door. I took it out, folded it once along the crease, and put it in the recycling bin under the sink. The documents were in federal hands. They didn't need me to carry them anymore. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, dried them on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, and picked up a knife. That was the end of it.